Hi, are you looking to buy a modern Rolex Submariner, but you really like the look and the feel of a vintage watch? If so, you need to buy the watch I'm about to talk about. Watch this video. Roll the intro. And we're back. You're chatting with John P. Today, I'd like to talk to you about a very interesting Rolex Submariner that I think you will like a lot, and I think it will appreciate in value in the coming years. But first, I'd like to thank you for watching my previous videos, liking, subscribing, and leaving the comments. I really do appreciate it. And also thanks for checking out delraywatch.com, my site where I sell pre-owned watches. We just dropped a ton of new awesome watches on the site. Because we went to the watch show, we picked up all the great things that you know and love. Rolex, Omega, Speedmaster, Seamasters. We have all the great classics. Check it out, delraywatch.com. So let's jump into the wristwatch check because it's a very good segue into the watch I need to talk to you about. Today, I'm wearing a Rolex 16800. So it's a Rolex Submariner transitional. I'm going to put a picture here because mine has a very special dial that I'm going to talk to you about, and I'm also going to coin the term for the type of dial it is because these are just starting to become vintage and something very interesting is happening with the dials, and it's going to be very collectible. So let's get into the topic. The Rolex 16800. This is a watch that you need to buy. If you're looking at buying a modern Rolex Submariner, but perhaps it's a little too big for you, or even perhaps you like the look of a vintage watch, but you need the modern day wearability of a modern watch, you need it to be easy to wear, this is the Rolex for you. This Rolex Submariner is called transitional because it bridges the gap between what is traditionally known as a vintage Rolex sub while packing many of the great features of a modern Submariner. So let's talk about vintage Submariners first. You have so many Rolex Submariners on the market. You have the 5512, the 5513, and even the 1680, which was the watch that came before the 16800. But the thing is with vintage watches and vintage Submariners, oftentimes they're difficult to wear for the guy or the lady that's used to wearing modern watches. You know, they need to be baby a little bit more, and generally you feel like you should take care of it more just out of respect for the watch, and to keep it in better condition because it becomes more of a collector's item. Also, don't forget the water resistance. These things are very charming. I'll admit myself, I love vintage watches. That is the theme of the channel after all. But for some people, these qualities can be alienating. As you saw in one of my previous videos about the Datejust, if you just go through the comments, you see so many people that say, I love vintage watches, but I agree, they can be difficult to wear for the average guy or girl. So, the Rolex 16800, it's a transitional model, which means the watch has many qualities of a vintage Submariner like the 1680 or the 5512 or 5513, but at the same time, it has so many great qualities of a modern Rolex watch that just make it extremely wearable. So, I'll tell you these qualities, and you'll see that it really is a great watch for the person that wants very good, everyday, wearable Rolex sub, but likes everything charming about a vintage watch. So the 16800 was made for about 10 years. It was made from about 1978 to 1988. The 16800 went through two main variations. There was a matte dial and there was a gloss dial. Now, a couple years into that 10-year transition, I think it was roughly between 1983, they started transitioning from matte dials on the Submariners to gloss dials. So Rolex was creating the process to instead of using a matte dial, make a glossy dial. You know, that is a typical quality of a modern Rolex Submariner. You have a glossy dial. But the guys at Rolex that were creating this process, they didn't quite have it down yet. So what you have during this transition period on the 16800 is you have a couple of different interesting dial combinations. So the dial combinations you have are the matte dial, which was the original, which had the painted on lume, And then you had the gloss style, which had the gold ring lume. But the gloss dial, the paint started cracking. So you have something called the spider dial, which if you're into vintage, you see there's a picture here. The dial just turns into like kind of a spider web. It's very cool, and it's oftentimes very desirable, especially if the pattern is semi-uniform or uniform. It's very cool. I love the spider dials. There's also a couple other models where they have spider dials as well, but this is one of the major watches that it was happening. You also have, with this model, a gloss dial that turned matte. Now, when that happens, you have a matte dial that used to be gloss and has the modern white gold rings around the lume, which gives it a very cool look, and it's also very desirable. Now, there's another type of dial, and this is just absolutely amazing, and it's actually the one that I have on my wrist right here, which is why I just had to pick it up for myself. Now, if you see in the picture here, I tried to capture just the beauty behind this dial. What it is it's a gloss dial that is halfway or partially turned matte. Now, when you look at it at different angles, it creates this kind of reflection in the shimmer of possibly a sponge. And so I want to coin the term on this dial right now to be the sponge dial 16800. As more of these watches are turning vintage into that 30-year mark, a lot more of these are going to be turning into what I have here, this sponge dial. So eventually this dial will become totally matte, and it's going to turn into a matte dial 16800. While it doesn't have the painted on lume, it's still a matte dial 16800, and it's going to be worth several $1,000s more. Now keep in mind, this is just happening. If you look around on the internet, you're not going to see a lot of information about this because it's just happening right now. These watches are just starting to age to the point where these dials are turning glossy to matte. So this is going to be a new thing, and it is my gamble that these watches, and in my opinion, they are going to be worth several $1,000s more in the next few years. So if you're interested in this watch, I would absolutely recommend you look at one right now if you can swing the budget. So back into the qualities with the 16800. There are some qualities that are very reminiscent of a vintage Rolex watch. For example, you have the aged lume. It's starting to turn a bit of a custard. Some of them are even darker. Also, on the early 16800s, you have the painted on lume, which is a very vintage watch. But also the bracelets. The bracelets are a bit lower quality steel than the modern day equivalent Rolex Submariner, so you get kind of that clinky feel when you take it off, or it's on there pretty hard right now. It's another quality of these. The clasps don't have the little thing to put your finger under to pop it open, but you can kind of hear the clink, and that is very reminiscent of a vintage sub, and it's actually honestly very, very charming. You know, you kind of think back to the vintage divers and the whole Comex and the Jacques Cousteau and all that kind of just, this is something they would wear, just clink it around and just listen to it. It sounds nice, it's very charming, and it represents kind of the spirit of the Rolex Submariner, which is a tool watch, a dive watch. It's not meant to be, a glamorous, shiny luxury item. These were dive watches after all, and that sound, that's a dive watch. So these watches also have many features that make it very wearable for the guy that likes wearing a modern watch. So for one, the movement in this is a Rolex 3035. What this means is it's a quick set watch. Now, quick set watch, for those of you that don't know, is when you turn the crown, you can change the date quickly in one of the positions without having to go all the way around and change the time. Some people don't like this, some people like this, but one thing for sure is this is a quality in modern watches. Now, this was the first Submariner, the 16800, that has this quality. That is one of the reasons why this is considered transitional, because that is a big feature. That's a big feature for many people. It turns them away from vintage because they don't like going around all of the days to change it. It takes too long, or it's just kind of tedious for someone that needs to put on a watch quick and you don't wear it every day. Next, and this is a huge one, it has a sapphire crystal. Now, the previous 1680, it had an acrylic crystal, and so did the other vintage subs. That means a few things. The acrylic crystals kind of get dinged up, and you got to swap them out if you can't polish them. But with the sapphire crystal, I mean, this is a 30-year-old watch, and it looks as great as the day it came out of the factory. And also, when you look through the sapphire crystal, you can see just the gorgeous aged lume that would be a little bit clouded up and take away from its luster if you had the acrylic. So that's a huge selling point. And another quality of the 16800 that just makes it such a great wear, especially for those of you that do like to put your watch to true sporting usage, it has 300 meters depth rating for diving. So if you want to jump in the pool with this, I would be very comfortable recommending it. Now, if you had a 1680, a 5512, 5513, I would absolutely not recommend it. You're going to have some serious problems if there's any problem at all with the water resistance. But with this, you can expect this to be very watertight. You can give a 1680 to a fully qualified watchmaker, and he's going to make sure that this is going to be able to withstand some serious water. Now, also when you pair that with the sapphire crystal, you're getting great water tightness, and you have a vintage watch that you can wear every day. It's going to be able to take a beating, and you're going to be able to take it in the water. That's one of the downsides of vintage for many people, is they can't wear it every day. They can't take it everywhere. They can't take it to the beach. That is such a great selling point. Lastly, with the Rolex 16800 Submariner, I need to speak to you about the value. Now, in my opinion, and honestly the opinion of a lot of people close to me in the watch industry, this watch is going to be the next vintage Rolex to skyrocket in price. And I'll tell you why. Right now, this watch can be had at a retail price of around $7,000 for naked and a little bit higher with the box and papers and all the accoutrements. But if you look at the other watches that are just a little bit older, they're going for $5,000 more. Now, when we're looking at just a difference of a couple years or possibly even 1 year, it is amazing to me that these have not seen the type of price jump that the others have seen. Now, this being said, they have gone up a very slight bit, but it's only because all watches and all Rolex Submariners have gone up. When you look at vintage Rolex, it has just skyrocketed, especially in the last year. But this guy, the 16800, it's staying there. It's just staying at that kind of level $7,000 price point. Now, as I mentioned before, as these dials start turning matte and you get kind of a sponge dial like I have here, the matte dial variations have already gone up a little bit. The earlier matte dials and the ones that have crossed over, they've gone up a few $1,000s. So if you can score one of these that are starting to change to matte in our sponge, or you can get one that's glossy and it's starting to loom so you can tell that it's probably going to change over, you need to buy this watch, and you need to buy it right now. As these start aging and more people start seeing the potential in these watches, they're going to dry up. Right now, they can be seen everywhere. And the reason for this is they don't quite appeal to the guy that likes vintage watches because they don't have an acrylic crystal. They don't have, dials that have just taken such a patina to them. But they are turning to that patina literally as we speak. And the watches, they aren't really favored by modern guys because of the things that I mentioned. They don't have the same quality metal. You get that clink on the bracelet. It feels very light. You don't have a large size. That's the other thing, and I'll put this in another video coming soon, is it wears relatively slim on the wrist, especially comparing to the Rolex Submariner Super Case that you have now. It wears like a proper 40 from the era. So almost like a modern day Just 36, which is hard to believe, but it has a very slim profile on the wrist. I have a 6.5-inch wrist, and this is really good on me. I can't wear the modern Submariner. And so when you consider these things, the watch is kind of left bastardized by both communities. The vintage guys don't quite want it yet because it doesn't really have the qualities that they prefer in some of the more older models. And the newer guys just don't want it because it doesn't have all the qualities that are in the modern day Submariner. So what does this mean? For you, this means a great value. Like I said, I would recommend, if you can swing the price, about $7,000, to buy one right now, wear it if you like it, and just keep it for a while. If you're looking for a good investment watch, and honestly, I don't recommend investing in watches unless you truly do like watches and you're willing to kind of have a little play money. But if you are looking for that kind of watch, I would recommend this. If you also do like vintage, also recommend this watch because you're getting the look of a vintage watch for way less price. It's going to go up in value. The dials are starting to turn interesting combinations, and you get all the benefits of a modern wearable watch, so you don't have to worry about it. To me, that's a no-brainer. It's a win-win, and I don't know why more people haven't jumped onto this bandwagon, but I think that they will very soon. So thanks for watching this video. I know I didn't do a hands-on of the 16800 comparing it to the 1680 or some of the more contemporary models, but that is coming soon. It takes a little bit different of a camera angle to pull this off, and it is planned, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, do your research on the 16800. You're going to see a lot of value. I know it. And remember, don't forget to like and subscribe. I do appreciate it, and it does help me. I go through all the comments, and as you can see in the previous videos, I do respond, and it's actually pretty fun talking to you and getting a lot of feedback from you. I really have taken it to heart. And also, remember the little giveaway we're doing with the Swatch System 51. If you follow me on Instagram, The Real John P., you follow Delray Watch on Instagram, Delray Watch, and also you sign up on the newsletter at delraywatch.com, you're going to be entered to win a System 51 by Swatch watch in just a handful of days. So make sure you do that. This is one of your last chances, and honestly, it's a really cool watch. It's a pretty cool watch with the cows on the back. Look at the other video. I think you'll like it a lot. So stay tuned for the next one. Thanks again for watching. You're chatting with John P. Ciao.